Hey everyone, and thanks for jumping back into the cryptoverse. Today, we're going to talk about Ethereum, but more specifically, we're going to discuss the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation and honestly discuss, is it looking like some type of Wyckoff distribution similar to what we saw with Bitcoin back in early 2021. If you guys like the content, make sure you subscribe to the channel, give the video a thumbs up, and also check out Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com. Now, before we get into this video, I should say that a lot of people are not often, well versed in understanding Ether's valuation against Bitcoin. Remember, there's a chance that Ether's valuation against Bitcoin could go down, not because Ether USD is going down, but perhaps because Bitcoin USD is going up and Ethereum is not keeping pace with it. So if Bitcoin were to go up 10% in a week, but Ethereum only goes up 5%, then the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation would actually go down. But in this video, I want to discuss a couple different things that ultimately lead to a short-term concern on the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation. Now, as you guys know, I love Ethereum. It's the second largest holding that I have in my cryptocurrency portfolio, but I also want to always take a long, honest look at the market and say, is this playing out? If it is, how do I manage my risk accordingly? So again, we talk about these scenarios not because they have to play out or because I think they'll necessarily play out, but it's just because the pattern exists and we need to understand that the risk is there in the market. So if you're not familiar with Wyckoff distribution, basically what I'm referring to is this sort of distribution pattern that we've seen play out amongst the asset class before, where you have this move higher into this distribution phase. You have several different peaks, and then ultimately you come back down. You can see that played out with Bitcoin back in early 2021, if you guys remember. Again, this was not, we said back in early 2021 that this is, that we're likely going to have a summer lull. And you can see over here that Bitcoin did show that Wyckoff distribution pattern where it did break back down. Look, it broke back up half a year later, but it doesn't discount the fact that this was like a 50% drop, okay? So why are we talking about this? Well, the problem is that you could argue the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation is showing some similarities, right? These peaks over here. And I think the question that I have is this going to break back to the downside? One of the reasons I say that is, if you were to draw, let me actually shift this to a linear scale where this might actually fit a little bit better. If you draw like a line just sort of connecting some of these prior points, you could argue that the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation, and this has been our argument for a long time, is in this macro uptrend channel. And once upon a time, we were holding resistance at these levels, right? We were holding resistance. But what happens if this was a move into a distribution phase of the Ether Bitcoin ratio and that we ultimately come back down? It's certainly possible that we come back down and we just continue our macro uptrend, right? That's possible. And perhaps we'll even go on to go put in another higher high in half a year, just like Bitcoin USD did, right? It had Wyckoff distribution, but then it accumulated back, and then we actually put in a new all-time high. So with regards to the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation, if this breaks back down into this channel down here, I think what we need to be looking for is it going to come back down, maybe hold this as support, and then come back up later on, maybe in 2023 for some secondary move. Okay, we want to keep this in mind. Now, one of the reasons I'm talking about this is because there's a number of ways that we could see a move manifest, okay? One thing is it's possible that Ethereum's valuation could go up against the US dollar, but still bleed against Bitcoin. Remember, in late 2020, Ethereum's valuation against the US dollar was actually going up, right? In late 2020, it was going up. Right here, it was going up. But that did not stop in late 2020. It did not stop the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation from bleeding. So that's a great example where Ether's valuation against Bitcoin went down, but Bitcoin is going up, and so was Ethereum's valuation against the US dollar. But Ether Bitcoin was actually going down. Now, there's one scenario where if Bitcoin breaks out to the upside and sort of puts everyone's fears to rest, if it breaks out to the upside, then perhaps it just goes parabolic, because then people think, okay, well, the entire bear market is just off, and we're going to see some other type of pattern play out. The other side of the equation, though, is if the bearish scenario plays out, where you basically see a repeat of what happened in 2018 for Bitcoin, where it put in a low, put in a higher low, put in a higher low temporarily after getting rejected off the 200-day. If it then puts in a lower low, that's where the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation could come back down. Okay, so I think that's what I'm looking at right now. If this pattern plays out where you put in a low, a higher low, and then a higher low after getting rejected off of the 200-day, this sort of bounces back up, which it's doing just like it did in 2018. If this comes back down and puts in a lower low, and then it maybe bounces back up, if this happens, that's where you could see Ethereum's valuation against Bitcoin take a hit. Remember, you might say, well, the dominance is pretty low. Look, the dominance was low in 2018 at the same time. Look at June 2018, we were at 42%. That's where we are today, at 42% dominance. So if the dominance of Bitcoin breaks out to the upside, why did it break out to the upside here? Well, it broke out here to the upside because Bitcoin, in June 2018, it put in a lower low. So altcoins, took a hit. Now, I don't really consider Ethereum an alt, but it is by the strictest definition. But if Bitcoin puts in a lower low and then bounces back up, I still would argue the Ethereum valuation against Bitcoin might actually be more likely to go down if Bitcoin has a bit more uncertainty by putting in let's call it a lower low. Okay, so you need to understand that this risk in the market exists not because it has to happen, but because if this plays out, then you're going to want to know about it ahead of time so that you can plan accordingly. So, for instance, if the Ethereum valuation against Bitcoin comes back down, or maybe it even rallies first up to 0.08, and then it comes back down, and we test this trend line again, then you might need to be on high alert. Okay. Now you might say, well, we've been holding some trend line here for quite a while. Let me delete all this. You could argue that we've been holding this trend line for quite a while, so why should it break? It doesn't have to, But remember, with Bitcoin, we were also holding some type of a trend line for a while, and then it eventually broke, right? I mean, it eventually broke, and once it broke, we then saw the floor fall out, and then we eventually put in a new all-time high later. So one of the things I think to watch right here, where this could be some type of potential path, is the Ethereum's valuation against Bitcoin. If it plays in the sandbox over here for a while, and then if it comes back down and this breaks, and we come back down to this channel down here, and then continue this uptrend and then break out again, this could be another type of longer distribution phase over here at perhaps higher valuations against the US dollar. Maybe we're at 10 to 20K by that point, but it doesn't discount the fact that there is a short-term risk, and part of that risk is if Bitcoin puts in a lower low, just like it did back in 2018. So I just want to, to honestly communicate the concerns on the market, and I think that is one of the concerns. If Bitcoin puts in a lower low, then you're likely going to see the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation bleed some. Alternatively, if Bitcoin breaks out to the upside, then there's a good chance that Ether's valuation against Bitcoin could still bleed in the short term if Bitcoin goes parabolic. So just keep this in mind, that Ethereum's valuation against Bitcoin might be stuck in traffic on struggle street for a while, especially if Bitcoin is unable to get back above its bull market support band. Remember, when Bitcoin is above the bull market support band, Ethereum can often outperform Bitcoin, but when Bitcoin's below it, Bitcoin tends to outperform Ethereum. And for right now, we still remain below that 20-week SMA. If we can get some weekly closes above it, then that might change the outlook, at least on Ether USD, but it might not change the outlook on Ether Bitcoin if Bitcoin goes parabolic. So hopefully I've done a good job of communicating what the risk is on the market. I don't really expect these videos to make me any friends, but I just want people to remember that these patterns do exist for these longer distribution phases, even if we don't like to admit it. And there is certainly a possibility that Ether's valuation against Bitcoin is experiencing some type of a distribution pattern, from which point we could come back down to these levels and then maybe work our way up to then breaking this level later on. Okay, so do keep this in mind, and remember that it's the Ethereum Bitcoin valuation that is of utmost concern in this video. Thank you guys for tuning in. Make sure you check out Into the Cryptoverse Premium at intothecryptoverse.com, and I'll see you next time. Bye.